I want to echo the thanks for the Union for inviting us and giving us an opportunity to share with you our thoughts and our requests for you to join in the important struggle of boycott, divestment, and sanction. I think it's important historically to understand, and I'm an historian, so I apologize that my intervention has some history in it. I cannot resist seeing people sitting in a university class, not giving them a history lesson. I'm conditioned that way. The call for boycott, divestment, and sanction was born out of three despairs, I would say, three disappointments. It was not just born out of the blue. The first disappointment was from the peace process. However people analyze the failure of the peace process, whether the way Moshe did it or whatever other analysis, it was clear that the peace process was leading nowhere, and far worse, under the umbrella of the peace process, the occupation deepens, the colonization is extended, and the ethnic cleansing continues. So one despair that produced the call for boycott, divestment, and sanction is the failure of the peace process. The second despair was on the Palestinian side from the results of the more armed side of the struggle, which happens to the liberation movements. The armed struggle, in whatever form it took, did not liberate even 1 square inch of Palestine. And some sides of it were even quite destructive to the Palestinian society, and not just were not bearing the fruits that the struggle should did. So when people call upon you to support the PDS, it's also a call on a non-violent strategy coming from the Palestinians, not being convinced that the armed struggle is the right way forward. And thirdly, it was also born out of the despair from any significant change from within the Israeli society. People waited patiently for transformation of the Israeli Jewish society through its political elite, through its policies and strategies, and again, this did not happen. So the whole campaign for boycott, divestment, and sanctions that was initiated by the Palestinian civil society, wherever Palestinians are, is a non-violent strategy that is both legitimate and, as tangible results in the last 2 years show, is also quite effective and successful. So I think you are part of a winning strategy here, and one that history would remember as positive as the anti-apartheid movement against that regime in South Africa was. I want to focus on the Histadrut because I think that it's important to know whom you face if you decide to be part of such a campaign. I'm an academic lecturer, and one of the first outfits I chose to analyze and to take action against, even when I was still in Israel, was the academic establishment, because I was part of it. I thought it was not fair for me to go and say boycott workers, boycott even bankers or politicians, and sort of exempting my own group from such a scrutiny. And I analyzed the role of the Israeli academia and came to the conclusion that they are culpable, and definitely they should be targeted, as well as the political elite in Israel, for pressuring the state into changing its policies. In a similar way, I think we should analyze the Israeli PTUC, if one can call it Histadrut, in that manner. But since the word Histadrut was mentioned, so I suppose everybody knows that we are talking about the General Union of Workers in Israel. It's a very important part of the Israeli reality, and therefore targeting it is definitely one effective way in conveying the message of the pressure from the outside and the depicting of Israel as a pariah state, as long as it continues its systematic violation of human and civil rights on the ground. Now, Moshe Machover already mentioned that the Histadrut was created as an ideological tool for the colonization of Palestine. I think something is very important to be mentioned as well. Zionist movement, as you probably all know, had some socialist agenda and aspiration when it came to colonize Palestine. Hence the creation of collective settlements such as the kibbutzim, hence the creation of a general trade union. So they were talking about labor, workers' rights and so on. But there was always one condition, which was very important. Socialism can be applied as long as it doesn't clash with Zionism. And what it meant in real life is that the rights of the indigenous native population of Palestine and later of Israel cannot be included as part of the socialist project, because their aspiration, their rights, and their existence contradicted the Zionist project. So if a trade union was first and foremost a Zionist trade union, the fact that it was trying to be a socialist one as well was irrelevant in the end of the day. It was relevant for struggles of Jewish workers inside the state of Israel, and this Histadrut union had some achievement in protecting the rights of Jewish workers inside Israel. But whenever it was asked to play a national role at the expense of the indigenous people, or as an assisting tool for oppressing the indigenous native people of Palestine, it gladly did it, and that's why its record is quite dismal. In the early years of the state, or just before the creation of the state, it was the tool through which the Zionist movement expelled Palestinians from the labor market. Its main slogan was occupying the labor market, namely expelling or Judaizing the labor market at the expense of Palestinian workers. Now, I don't always believe that the way you are born conditions the way you behave at the present, but sometimes it's not a bad explanation for how you behave. And this is one case study where the origins of the Histadrut explain its nature, or if you want, character, today. After the State of Israel was created, the Histadrut, as some of you would know, became an important employer, not just a union representing employees. It still is, much more as an employer than a representative body of employees. And as an employer, it needed a lot of government subsidy and did not always represent the interests of the workers. And in fact, part of the lack of that subsidy caused the big Israeli financial crisis or economic crisis in 1966 to 1967 that is part of the background for the 1967 war, but that's not important for our case study. What is important for our case study, that after the June 67 war, the Histadrut came out as a very weakened trade union. And the occupied West Bank and Gaza Strip offered it opportunities to enhance its strength again by doing several things. It took over the issue of employment of Palestinian workers inside Israel and the dumping of Israeli industrial goods on the occupied territories on the other. So it did not only play an important role in the occupation, it is the major reason for the economic occupation, which impoverished the Palestinian people in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. As bad as the Jewish settlement in it, as bad as the war later on, and as bad as the military rule. So it had direct vested interest that made sure that the local industry could not develop and its own industry would take over. Far more important, I think, in this respect, and this would go on until the end of the 20th century, it was a partner for negotiating the terms of the employment of Palestinians in the Israeli economy, especially in unskilled work, but also in construction and other major areas of labor. And the deal was that the Palestinians workers would pay, in fact they didn't pay, it was deducted from their salary, that they would pay in this way indirectly all kinds of levies that I think workers usually are willing to pay, for sick leave, for national insurance, for union membership, and so on. However, that money was never used to grant the Palestinian these rights. On the contrary, this was just a deduction of the basic salary. And one Israeli economist calculated that until 2000, the Palestinian workers in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip were robbed of more than $4 billion from the wages that were justly earned by them, and the salaries to begin with were not very high. So you can imagine how much was left. I think that the most absurd levy that the Histadrut imposed on Palestinian workers came in the late 1990s and still is imposed. Not that many Palestinian workers are now employed inside Israel, but they are employed in projects. They pay 2% of the salary for the fund for the development. I'm talking mainly on construction workers. They pay 2% of the salary for a fund for the development of the Israeli construction industry. Now, what this means in real life is that this fund is looking for bringing foreign construction workers to replace the Palestinians. So they're paying money for the Histadrut to look around the world for workers who would dispossess them from the labor. And the other side of the fund, as Haaretz showed lately, is used to buy all kinds of gifts to the IDF as appreciation for its defense of the State of Israel. So we have here an organization that, at least until 2000, was an important part of the oppression, of the occupation, and moreover took part in decreasing the standard of living of the Palestinian workers, and at the same time worked to even close down the few opportunities they had for making a living. As a result of the movement to bring foreign workers and to replace the Palestinians, and as a result of the occupation itself, as you know, the levels of unemployment and of poverty have risen in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip since the beginning of the 21st century. The Histadrut today is not different. It is playing again the national Zionist game at the expense of any universal value, whether it is the value of unions, workers, or labor. It is an essential part of the regime. It is still a very important tool in pushing forward for the Judaization of the Galilee and the Negev. It protects the rights of the workers in the settlements, but not the workers in the occupied territories. And in many ways, when you send a message to the Histadrut, you send a message to the regime and to the establishment. But I would like to end by saying something which I think you are aware of, but I would say it nonetheless. Because of the kind of capitalist system, or the neoliberal capitalist system that Israeli governments adopted in the last decade or so, the role of the Histadrut anyway as a protector of labor's rights has been diminished in such a way that, in fact, either you have alternative radical trade unions, as Moshe mentioned, one of them, or what you have is what we call in Israel the 10 big unions, which are connected to the Histadrut but have their own independent power. These are the most powerful unions in the land. And what characterizes them is that they represent occupation and labor from which Palestinians are exempt, because all of these unions have strong connection to the security industrial complex. So, in other words, any message to the Histadrut is not only not going to undermine the rights of Jewish or Arab workers in the land. In fact, this process will continue of privatization and so on. It would, on the other hand, has a chance to send to the few brave activists among the unions, including the academic unions, a message that their position, which says to the world, boycott me, which is not an easy thing to do, is enhanced from the outside. And therefore their position is not insane, but makes moral and logical sense. And I think you have a very important role here to play not only in showing solidarity with what now spearheads the Palestinian struggle against oppression, you also have a chance of enhancing and empowering a genuine transformation that will, I hope, will eventually take place within Israel, where the values that the few believe in it are the universal values that you believe in it. And anybody who's been involved in such struggles, and I can say from my personal experience, to know that the way you interpret the reality, the way that you put forward your criticism of the regime under which you live, if this way is echoed by people from the outside, who use the same language, who tell you that they believe in the same values, and tell you that you have the same moral basis, that they have the same moral basis and impulse to push forward that kind of struggle, then you are feeling much stronger than your numbers are, and you have the power to continue and to recruit many more for the change within, for the benefit of Jews and Arabs alike. Thank you very much.